our daily check-in with Nathan Dean. Why? Because he's down in Washington, D.C., and it's his job to tell us what is going on in Washington, D.C., and that's a tough job in normal times, but a little bit more even difficult today when we've got a government that's shut down. I'm not sure I'm seeing much conversation between the two sides. So, Nathan, you're down there in D.C. You're right in the middle of it. What's kind of the feeling down there these days?
So the feeling is that this shutdown is most likely going to continue for at least another few days, if not a little bit longer. I mean, like you just mentioned, both sides aren't really talking, and both sides really don't feel the need to talk at this point. Polling over the weekend suggests that Republicans are getting more of the blame amongst independents. The Democrats love that message. Republicans are also feeling pretty good because their base is pretty happy with their position of, we've passed a clean CR. The Democrats need to come to us. So both sides are feeling pretty good. And when that happens, neither side really feels the need to talk. Now, I will say is there are some pressure points coming up over the next few weeks, though, or just days. October 10th is when the federal government employees are going to miss their paycheck. And I think more importantly for that pressure point is on October 15th, this is when the military misses their paycheck. And so as the military misses their paycheck, policymakers are going to feel that pressure to come together and figure out what this deal looks like, because ultimately, both sides are going to have to reopen the government. It's just a matter of when.
And we are starting to see more tangible results from, I don't want to say results, signs of damage because of the shutdown. There's flight delays, at least in the New York area already, because there's not enough air traffic controllers, for instance. There's flight delays into the Los Angeles area as well. Is this the kind of thing that gets constituents angry and starting to call their representatives in Washington to say, get back to work?
Yes. I mean, think of this government shutdown and the response to it is that like a ball that's slowly running downhill, and then all of a sudden it gets a little bit steeper and goes much faster. I had a daily check-in with our equity strategists this morning, and I said, how are you feeling? And they said, look, if this continues into the next week, we need to start thinking about this more, because the message has always been that markets aren't really all that impactful by shutdowns, but as they go on, then the impacts get greater and greater. For example, at the end of the month, SNAP benefits runs out, and there are ways that the USDA could potentially get SNAP benefits into November, but it's tricky. So if you have exposure to grocers, for example, that's something you should start thinking about maybe around the October 17th beyond timeframe, because then investors are going to get a little bit skitterish. So I will say is that right now we're still in the stages of everybody's just waiting around, waiting to see what happens. But ultimately, as this continues on, the market and for those of us who are trying to fly with air traffic controllers and TSAs, the impacts get greater.
Yeah, I want my air traffic controllers happy in their job.
Yes.
At their desk.
Yes, exactly. They're getting paid. They're happy. They're not worried about whether they can put food on the table.
So, Nathan, what do you think the role has been and could it be of President Trump in maybe resolving some of these impasses?
So, he just floated, you spoke earlier about this idea where he floated some openness to, negotiating on Obamacare subsidies. These are the subsidies that expire at the end of the year. And one of the reasons why the Democrats really were interested in this government shutdown. Now, look, we probably know what the framework of this deal looks like. It's a reopening of the government plus an agreement to deal either through a vote or an actual deal on these Obamacare subsidies. But both sides need to actually go through the motions before they start these negotiations. Now, President Trump walked back that remark a little bit, saying, look, I don't like Obamacare. But Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, just flat out said last night she wants to make a deal on this because her constituencies are impacted. So I think what happens is that eventually, as the parties get to that pressure that they need to come to the table, you'll see President Trump float this openness again. And I think that's where the Democrats will say, look, we have enough here to declare victory. Let's go forth. Let's conduct a negotiation, and let's figure out what this strategy is to expand these Obamacare subsidies by the end of the year.
Paul, I go back to the idea that the president, the Republicans need to come up with a way of maybe embracing extending those Obamacare subsidies by branding it as something that's Trumpian.
That's a good point. Yep,
and then that allows the president to take a victory lap. Marjorie Taylor Greene gets on board as well. So,
that's a good strategy.
Some thinking outside the box here.
Get on the Acela train, head down to D.C., make it happen.
Is that something, Nathan, that you think that they might be open to repackaging everything, rebranding it as a Trump idea?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a political debate, and politics has very strange outcomes. You could just call it Trump care or, something like that. And you never know. Exactly. I mean, it may get President Trump on board with this idea. So I'll say is that, this is anticipated right now. They're still going through the motions. Neither side wants to negotiate, which is fine. I mean, obviously it's not fine for the people that are impacted by this, but our base case scenario is as you get to this October 15th date where the military begins to lose funds, that's when the pressure is going to be even greater. Because look, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has kept his caucus away from Washington. Why? Partly so that they're not giving interviews to the press and they are being paid. And answering that question is, why are you being paid and the military is not? So a lot of this is political, but ultimately, I think President Trump and the Democrats ultimately will make a deal.
And Nathan, you mentioned here not going to get paid on Friday. I'm sure, at your kid's soccer practice or drop-off line, you've got a lot of neighbors that work for the federal government. How nervous are they?
They're very nervous, especially this morning after President Trump floated the idea, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the White House memos essentially said that maybe you don't have to pay back furloughed workers. I mean, there are 750,000 workers at the moment that are furloughed. Only about 91,000, according to our estimates, are here in the Washington, D.C. area. 80% of the federal workforce is outside of the DMV. But I will say is that before, we could say that it's a 99% chance that these federal workers would ultimately get back their back pay. I would just say, and I'm guessing, a 90% chance now. I don't think that it's going to be into this situation where these federal workers get back pay. But let's also not forget, the contractors that are furloughed, they don't get back pay. And so there's a lot of angst about this, and there's a lot of angst about whether or not Director of OMB Russ Vought follows through on his threats to conduct federal layoffs.
I was just going to go there. It just feels like every day there's a new idea that's being floated, whether it is mass layoffs or something like not paying federal employees for days that they've been furloughed. Does it feel like they're kind of letting things come out, leaking things, and seeing how the public reacts before deciding whether to move forward with it?
Yeah, and I think this is more of a political exercise than anything else, is that they're just putting out ideas to see how the public reacts to it and see how the Democrats react to it. I mean, a carrot and stick strategy, if you will. But I will say is that, if the Democrats continue to see polling data that independents are blaming the Republicans for this, and, some of that data was fairly substantial that these independents were blaming Republicans. If the Democrats see that and President Trump follows through on his threat to fire workers or not conduct back pay, I think it pushes the Democrats back into their shell a little bit more and just say, look, we can't negotiate. Let's just keep the shutdown going a little bit longer.
All right, so is there anything in the next day or two that could be a catalyst here, or is this just grinding time out for another 4, 5, 6 days?
Well, I think it's grinding for the shutdown, but one of the things we are telling our clients is just non-shutdown related is be aware of potentially a farm aid package being announced as soon as today, potentially around $10 billion from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, that would go to farmers. We did a quick analysis on the terminal that showed that, this money would most likely be spent for seed and fertilizer in the fourth quarter. So it's a short-term gain. Short-term problem alleviation. There are still long-term questions about related to soybeans. So as the government remains shut down, that farmer piece, that's really where we're focusing our time at the moment.
Nathan, who's the number one person you're watching here? We talk a lot about President Trump, but he kind of takes himself out of it sometimes. Is it John Thune? Is it Chuck Schumer? Are they still kind of the keys to unlocking this?
They are. I mean, obviously, and I'm being very simplistic here, is that the House really doesn't matter. So any statement you see from Speaker Johnson or Representative Jeffries, take it with a grain of salt. For me, it's Senator Thune and Senator Schumer, and it's the gaggle of bipartisan senators that were on the floor last Friday. Think of Susan Collins, think of Mark Warner, think of, Senator Ossoff from Georgia. Those are the individuals that ultimately will figure out where this, shutdown ends, because two Democrats and an independent that caucuses with the Democrats have already signed on to extend the government open until November 20th. They only need 5 more. And so as the pressure mounts, I would be looking at those bipartisan senators under the leadership of John Thune and Chuck Schumer to ultimately decide where this ends, because they are the ones, not the House and not the president, that will come up with the deal that then goes to the president for his blessing.
Nathan Dean, thanks so much. Always appreciate it. Nathan Dean, Senior Policy Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence.